As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
A beautiful Tuesday evening, the 13th day of the month of December, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you on another episode of ICAN on Air. The year is winding up gradually. You and I have always been part of the program right from the beginning of the year, and we're very grateful for having the life to be part of the program. As usual, I've come with another topical issue that we'll be discussing today. You know, the year is winding up and we are gradually moving into the new year. We've come in the last 2 weeks, talked about entrepreneurship. We've talked about IT, tax compliance, the opportunity that abounds in the year 2023. And I decided to come with this topic today to enrich that which we have been having in the last few weeks, last few months. And that is talking on assessing capital through through exchange. You know, talk about entrepreneurship, taxation, businesses around. Now we are talking about assessing capital through the exchange. That's just a means of raising funds. And to do justice to this person, to this topic of today, it's no other person than the woman that the cap fits that can do justice to it. No other person than Tinuade Awe, who is the Chief Executive Officer of NGX Regulation Limited, formerly a Nigerian exchange, group, formerly known as the Nigerian Exchange Stock Exchange, a self-regulatory organization licensed by the Security and Exchange Commission to provide regulatory services within the Nigerian capital market. Prior to attaining this current position as the Chief Executive Officer, she was the Executive Director, Regulation at NCE. In that role, she was responsible for providing effective leadership to ensure that the NCE carry out the regulatory activity in the legally compliant fashion. She was the executive of NCE from 2012 to 2020. Additionally, she served as the secretary of the Council of NCE from 2011 to 2015, head of legal department from 2011 to 2012, and head of legal and regulation division from 2012 to 2017, in which role she served as a general counsel. Before the NCE, she worked with Law Clerk, United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. She has been a non-executive director on the board of the Central Security Clearance Services, PLC, since 2018, a former trustee of the Investors Protection Fund of the Nigerian Exchange Limited, where she served as the board of trustee from 2016 to 2021. She also served as the board of Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria for 2 consecutive years from 2013 to 2021. During her tenure on the board of FRSC, she chaired the Corporate Governance Committee, where our board level responsibility for monitoring the implementation of the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. Sincerely speaking, I've had a seasoned guest who is prepared to open our eyes and broaden our knowledge in the area of assessing capital through the exchange. Like I always say, as you are preparing for the new year, it will be nice for you to bring your goods and services on ICAN on here, because this is a global space, where you can promote your goods and services. Sincerely speaking, I will go on a very short break. When I'm coming, I'll come in with our guest, and I can tell you we are ready to move on a very fast pace and impact you. Stay tuned. Don't go away. I'll be right back. Welcome back, and we are on the guest segment. And like I did the introduction at the initial stage, we have joining us this evening, Tinuade Awe, and we are talking on assessing capital through exchange. Tinuade, a pleasure to have you on board this evening.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening.
Yeah, we start and we move on V8 engine so that our members can enjoy that which we have prepared for them for today. Sometimes we hear the phrases like capital formation, capital base, capital appreciation, capital adequacy. Yeah, pardon me, madam, pardon me. I think I'm starting from behind. But our global viewers would like to be educated on what an exchange is. There is no person better placed than you to do justice to the curiosity. Kindly run us through the concept of an exchange and what an exchange does.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're very kind to say that there's nobody better placed. I'm sure that there are several people better placed. But
And
an
this for this
exchange is
evening.
an exchange is basically a market. It's and as the word exchange, I think the word exchange is actually very apposite because you are exchanging something, you're exchanging value. It's a market where capital is purchased. That's the simplest explanation that I can give to what an exchange is. And what you have is the people that the entities that need capital come there and sell securities, and those securities are bought by people in exchange for capital. So I think the securities that we're most used to are secure equity, equities of listed companies. I think a lot of people, when they think about an exchange, they think about listed companies. But you can also have bonds where the securities that are being purchased are bonds. You also have exchange traded funds. You have REITs, you have mutual funds. There are all sorts. You have derivatives, although the jury is still out. Some people believe derivatives are securities, some people don't. That doesn't have to detain us here. But there are various types of capital products that people can buy and sell on an exchange. And the idea of the person who is buying is that they're trying to make an investment with a view to probably a dividend, a capital appreciation, or a long-term holding to keep an asset in something where the value will be retained.
Beautiful way to start the show today by giving us the explanation on what the concept of exchange is and what it does. It takes me to my next question. If you can explain to us the various ways which a company can raise capital through the stock exchange.
Okay, so when a company comes into existence, there are various ways in which it can raise capital. It can raise capital through, if you and I wanted to create a company, so we take from our savings, and that's the capital that we'll use to form the company and use out of it for working capital and to buy whatever we need. But you can already see that a company like that is not going to go very far, unless, of course, of us are billionaires and we both don't know, and we have a lot of money that we can put in the company. And so companies go through different stages where they need capital. Sometimes it's the owner capital, such as the one I described in this fictitious company that both of us are shareholders of. Sometimes it can be an angel investor, such as a rich uncle, or somebody who is just an idea angel who has, invests in that area of the economy. Now, when companies get to a certain stage of maturity in their growth phase, they may need to have the kind of capital that you cannot pull together from people you know. And it's at that stage that the idea of coming to the capital market and the exchange as a market where you can intermediate capital that can come to. So they can come, and what they do is the company has to be a public company, and it comes and it does what we call an initial public offering. That is an offering to the public at large, as opposed to friends, family, and venture capital, and that where it's still a bit more private. And so comes and lists on the exchange. Now that is equity. A company can also decide that it wants to do debt. Now, you can take debt from a bank, but again, even if you get a syndicated loan and you have a number of banks, you may find that the kind of huge amounts of money that you want to get, you would have to get from a larger number of people. And that's where you would be thinking, for example, of a debt instrument like a bond, which is a fixed income instrument that allows you to raise money from the public. So those are two of the ways, via equity, where basically you sell shares in the company and you take money in exchange for giving up part of the control that you have in the company, or you sell debt by way of a bond. Those are two very, very similar, public common ways by which a company can raise capital through a stock exchange.
two common ways that the
Yes.
companies can go ahead to raise capital through the stock exchange: equity and debt. And you lay emphasis to say the company must be public and again listed so that they can have that transaction. Having understanding of this, madam, for private company, like you said, who wants to share some of the legacies and get more capital, uh, how can they raise this capital through exchange? What are the requirements that they are expected to fulfill before this capital can be raised?
Now, let me just piggyback on what I had said before. So, first of all, if you're going to be raising equity, you have to be a public company. Now, you can raise debt without being when you're a public company, but you are not listed. So, yes, you can get listed, and you know your equities are available for sale. You can raise debt without being a listed company, but you have to be public. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Now, how can a private company, considering raising capital, what does it do? Well, there are quite a number of things that it has to do, and I'll just try and shorten them. One of them is that it has to get prepared, and there's a lot in that getting prepared. One of the first things I said is that to raise money from the public, you have to be a public company, okay? To come and approach a stock exchange that you want to raise money, you be a public company. Now, the first thing is you need, if you decide that you want to do equity, even the decision of the type of money, of capital you should raise, whether you should raise it by way of equity or you should raise it by way of debt, is something that you need somebody, an entity called an issuing house, to help you to think through, whether you want to call them an issuing house or an investment bank. So the first thing is, as I said, getting prepared to try and look at your financials and say what would make the most sense given the financials that you have and given where you want to get to. Now, assuming that you decide in conjunction with this financial advisor that you want to go through equities, therefore you want to be a listed company, there's now a whole slew of things you need to do. Remember, you're a private company. One of the things you really need to do is to become a public company. To become a public company, your shareholders have to give you the approval to become a public company. You need to change your MEMAT, you need to change your articles. Then there are a number of requirements. Because you are becoming a public company, you need to register your shares with the Securities and Exchange Commission. There are certain criteria that you need to give to meet, and your financial advisors will know that, interacting with the Securities and Exchange Commission for you in order to register those shares. Because under Nigerian law, you cannot offer securities to the public without a registration from the SEC. So remember, you've been operating as a private company. You were not even public. You need to become public. You need to register your shares with the SEC. You need to engage with a financial advisor. Now, that's on one side. Now, on the listing side, you then need to look at the NGX and say, which of the boards of the NGX do I want to list on? Because the NGX has 3 active boards. It has a board called the Premium Board, it has a board called the Main Board, and it has a board called the Growth Board. It has, I say active because there's another board that is actually on its, it's in the process of being, of some changes being made to it. It's called the ASEM board. So I'm not going to focus on ASEM for now. So depending on the type of company that you are, and where you want to go will also depend on which of the boards you want to list on. Now, without going into the criteria of all the boards, the things that your financial advisors will be trying to look at is, okay, if we want to list on the board, what's our market capitalization? Our market capitalization is nothing more than what is the price we want to sell the securities times the number of shares that we have. So they'll be looking at market capitalization. They'll be looking at things like your pre-tax profits, what's the operating record, your financial statements. Do you have 3 to 5 years of financial statements? They want to make sure that if you have not been doing things like audit, you are auditing them. They want to make sure that you have what we call a free float. Remember that if you are coming to list, you are coming to a market, you have to have shares that you are going to sell. And there are different requirements for each board on the number of shares, the percentage of your total number of shares that you have to have available for sale, as well as the value if you don't have that percentage. So in conjunction with your financial advisors and a number of other professionals that they will choose for you, and it shouldn't surprise you, auditors are amongst those professionals. When I say choose for you, actually it's you and them choosing together. So your auditors, the solicitors, if we're talking about bonds, there'll be trustees, because, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole lot of preparation to do. But if you prepare yourself and you are guided by the appropriate advisors, you will find that though it is not a walk in the park, you will be able to get through the process and you will get to the end that you want to, which is, the ability to list on an exchange, the access to that capital, and any of the other things that you want to do and benefit from that listing. I think I'll stop there.
A beautiful way, madam. I must tell you that you are actually giving us the requirement. But going by some of the things you mentioned when you're talking about the requirement, you know that companies are interested in listing on the exchange may be different, maybe at different stages of maturity and size. Are the listing requirement the same for every type of company? I know you mentioned some board that people need to consult as they progress when they want to get listed or participate in this exchange stuff. Are they the same?
No, the listing requirements are not the same. So they cover broadly the same areas, in that they're looking at some of the things I said, like operating records, financial statements, the size of shareholders, equity, what's your market cap, what's your free float. But they're different, they're calibrated differently. So the premium board is for large cap companies. So if you look at the premium board right now, you will see a number of big companies, big name, big capitalization companies. And they are also required to meet certain standards of corporate governance that are a bit higher than the other boards. So of course, if it's our company, that's the fictitious company that both of us have. Unless there's something I don't know, we're probably not going to be going to the premium board because of where we're starting from. But a company that has been in existence for several more years, has a bigger capitalization, is ready to meet those enhanced standards of corporate governance, the premium board will be where it wants to go. Now, there's a board called the Growth Board. And in fact, what is even interesting about the Growth Board is that it has two sections. It has an entry section and a standard section. So if your market capitalization is as low as 50 million, you can actually get onto the entry segment of the Growth Board. You understand what I'm saying? Now,
very
if
well.
It's 500 million to 4 billion, you can get onto the standard segment of the main board, of the Growth Board. So it really depends. And when you get to the main board, we're looking at things like 3 billion naira of shareholders' equity. So you can already tell that a company that is at 50 million capitalization is very different from the type that we list on the main board, even if we're looking at roughly the same sorts of criteria. You are looking at them differently calibrated, if you get what I mean.
That is well explanatory, madam. We now understand there are different categories. Like I will always say, those playing at the bigger league and those that are just coming on board. Let me state to all our audience that are globally connected that I have with me this evening, Tinuade Awe, the Chief Executive Officer of NGX Regulations Limited. And we've been doing justice to assessing capital through exchange. I know there are questions that is packed, loaded, are waiting to be broadcast. So I welcome your question and I'll be engaging our guest for today, who I'm flowing with. I can see better prospect for myself in the year 2023 with some of the enlightenment that I'm getting on this show today. So bring in your question. We are ready to fire on every cylinder. I proceed, Tinuade. Who are the market participants that have a role to play in either the listing or the capital raising process?
I think we've already spoken about some of them. Remember that I said that when you start saying deciding that I'm at a stage of my growth as a company where I need the kind of capital that can be pulled together by several anonymous capital providers, then I'm thinking of an exchange. One of the first professionals that you will engage is your issuing house, investment bank, financial advisor. They call them, people will call them different things, but they will provide that advice to you. That advice can range from things like, should you go for equity? Should you go for debt? And they basically lead the process that gets you to listing and to the capital raise. Now, they are the folks who will interface on your behalf with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So it's like they are your representative in things like the registration of your shares. They are your representative in things like the feedback to the SEC after you've had a capital raise and you're allotting and all of those kinds of things. Now, there are several other professionals. Surprise, surprise, since I'm speaking on ICAN on Air, of course, auditors are among the professionals. Remember that we've talked about audited financial statements, depending on the board, 3 to 5 years of audited financial statements. So, of course, your auditors are very important in this process. Your solicitors are also important because they are the lawyers that will ensure that you dot all your I's and you cross all your T's, that you are meeting all the... did you say something? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just buttressing your point, Madam. Flow on.
Okay, all right. That you are dotting your I's and you are crossing your T's, and they will make sure that they're reading the regulations correctly, they're reading the law correctly, they're doing what they need to do. Now, there's one professional that's very important with respect to the listing, and the same way as the issuing house is the primary contact with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the stockbroker, who in the parlance of NGX is called the trading license holder, is actually very important with respect to your interface with NGX and NGX regulation. Now, let me just say something. NGX regulation is a separate company from NGX, the operating exchange. It provides the regulatory services to NGX. And among the regulatory services it provides is actually helping to assess the applications that companies make for listing on NGX. So all those criteria that we're talking about, the interface with the trading license holder that says, oh, I have company X that wants to list, that interface and that back and forth with respect to whether they've met the listing criteria is done under NGX regulation. So those are some of the professionals. Just again, the issuing house, the trading license holder, who is also the stockbroker, the auditors, the solicitors, the registrars. Now, you know that registrars are they are agents of the company. They help the agents, the company to keep its shareholder information. They work with the company secretariat to ensure that the books and records of the company with respect to shareholding, movement in shareholding, and what have you, that all that is correct. Obviously, they do other things with respect to annual general meetings and other meetings of the company, but those need not detain us here. Now, of course, NGX itself is important because that's the entity you want to list on. Then the SEC, which is the apex regulator of the Nigerian capital market. You cannot do anything in the Nigerian capital market if you don't have the sanction of the SEC. And then you have the Central Securities Clearing System, which is again, when there's the trading done on NGX, one of the many things that the Central Securities Clearing System, which a lot of people know as CSCS, does is it does the clearing and settlement of those trades that are done on NGX. So, of course, if you are going to list on NGX, you also have to engage with CSCS, which is providing that service every time your shares are traded. So those are some of the significant entities to an equity transaction, a capital raising by way of equity. If it's bonds, as I said before, you have the trustees, and you may have custodians, you may have a number of other participants in the transaction.
Beautiful, man. And I can tell you for free that you are getting deep and exposing us. But one beautiful thing, listing all the participants that perform one duty or the other. Our profession is highly recognized. At least the auditor need to vet the book to give assurance whether your account give a fair view of what it should be. Let me quickly take the question because our audience are connected globally. And I have Garuba, I'm sure, all the way from the northern region of the country, asking this question. Can SMEs access capital through exchange? If yes, how can this be done?
Yes, SMEs can access capital through the exchange. Remember that I talked about the growth board, which is the board that recognizes that not everybody, every company that is listing on the exchange is at a very mature state of its corporate journey. So for the market capitalization for the entry segment of the growth board is 50 million naira. Now, I know that many SMEs will not be at that level of market capitalization, but there are certain SMEs, maybe more of the MEs, the not the smaller ones,
not
but
the smaller ones,
bigger SMEs that would be in that stage. I think basically what that question leads me to say is that the journey to capital is a journey, and it's important that companies go through that journey and they mature as they keep going. You know, you can start your capital journey with, as in our own fictitious company, just the capital from both of us, both of our savings from our jobs or businesses that we do. And then at some point, you have a rich uncle, you have somebody who hears about the work you are doing. Sometimes it may be even be a customer that is just impressed and says, you know what, I want to invest in this company. That's what you may call an angel investor. And then you can go on to venture capital. Those are people that pool funds together to invest in various ventures. And venture capital really it helps to discipline a company. It can be rough, it can be tough, because you have people who are not the owners coming in and saying, do this way because it's more professional, do it that way before it's more professional. And that can be a nice segue before you now list, where you are talking to, where you have several shareholders that are anonymous to you, in that, you know, they're from an exchange, you don't necessarily know them. So the journey through that is important. And the good thing is that you also have various other types of funding mechanisms that need not detain us here before you get to a listing, if that's what you want.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And let me also quickly recognize Fagbola, who is coming up with a question asking, what are the economics or financial indices the growing company needs to put in place before heading for the capital market for fundraising?
Ha 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 ha. You know, that I'm a bit concerned about answering that question because I come from a regulatory perspective. But if I take one of the proverbs in my language, that when leaf and soap have been together for a while, you don't make a differentiation. So from while not being an expert in that point, just by looking from osmosis and being in the market, I think certainly, you know, you need to look at the listing standards and try and ensure that you meet those listing standards. So, for example, one of the listing standards for the main board says that you must have been in operation for for at least 3 years. So we must have evidence that you've been in operation for 3 years. And then depending on within each, there are 3 entry criteria for the main board. There are 2 for the growth board. Now, if we look at some of the ones for the main board, you can see around pre-tax profits. That's one of the criteria that you have for the main board. And if you look at pre-tax profits for the main board, you will see that in one of the criteria, it says you should have made cumulatively about 300 million over the last 3 years, with at least 100 million in 2 of the 3 years. So cumulative 300 million. So in 2 of the 3 years, you should have at least have made 100. So when you start looking at the financial indices as to whether you're ready, first of all, have I been in operation for 3 years? If I was going to go through entry standard A for the main board, have I made 300 million in pre-tax profits cumulatively over 3 years? Do I have 100 million, or did I make that 300 million 2020 in year 1, 20 in year 2, and then in year 3 is when I made the remaining 260? I already know that my financials are not going to meet that criteria. Then, if I'm looking, for example, at my shareholders' equity, is it up to 3 billion? So I think you can go from the entry standards, which, by the way, are available on NGX's website, and use that to try and project, am I meeting the financial standards, or is it obvious that I don't meet them and I don't even need to, at this point, engage a financial advisor to come and tell me what I already know from just doing my own office of my CFO calculation based on the fact that there is information available. So I don't know whether I've answered the question.
You've done justice to it in a very beautiful manner. And I can say the words from our participant that you're doing justice to this topic and a lot to tap from. I proceed with this question, Tinuade.
Yes.
How does NGX Redco, where you add as a CEO, monitor and ensure compliance of company with post-listing obligation?
Right. So with when you list, there are a number of obligations that you get. I think the most critical of them, maybe I should take a step back and say, what is the purpose of securities regulation? And there's an organization, it's an international organization called IOSCO, that has said that there are 3 objectives of securities regulation. The first one is we want to protect investors. The second one is that we want the market to have integrity. The third one, when I say integrity, we want transparency, we want fairness, we want not smoke and mirrors in the market. And then finally, we want to contain systemic risk. We don't want a contagion from one company to the other and then everything just falls like a pack of cards. If you take that idea, then you will understand that if a company lists, it gets investors. So the first thing a regulator wants to do is we want to protect those investors. So you've taken money, you understand, you've done an IPO, for an initial public offering, you've offered your shares to the public, if that's how you came to the listing, all right? Investors want to know how you are doing. So it is our role and your obligation to ensure that you provide financial statements. Now, under the rules of NGX, you provide financial statements every quarter, and then you are obliged to audit them, your annual financials, once a year, and to provide them within 90 days of your year end. For the quarterlies, it's your management account. You provide it within 30 days of the end of the quarter. So that's an investor protection tool in that, and it's a transparency tool. It's also a risk management tool, because we are seeing what you are bringing out every quarter. We are seeing what you are bringing out every year. And as investors, we can decide, do we want to hold, let's continue to hold the position in your shares? Do we want to sell? Or do we want to, if we're not there, we've read it and we don't even want to enter. So we're not going to buy. All right. Now, So a lot of what we do is around disclosure. disclosure. And we have disclosures that we call periodic, such as those financial ones that I've explained, and then those that are continuous. So there's a whole slew of things that can affect the price of a company. Assuming, of course, because I'm talking to ICAN, CFO, a lot of them are ICAN people with the ICAN membership or similar membership that is recognized in Nigeria by ICAN. Now, the CFO's office, the CFO suddenly resigns. Alarm bells go off in people's minds. Why is the CFO resigning? Especially if the company does not announce. But if the company announces that the CFO is resigning, and because he's going off, maybe he's jackpine, for example, or maybe he's going off to another company, or he's moving to another subsidiary within the group or to the group, everybody is calm. It's not because he has seen something and he quickly wants to get out before alarm blows, as they say on the street, or a company has a major line and there is a fire in the warehouse or in the factory where that major line that is so critical to their businesses. The company has to disclose there was a fire. How did we have we contained the fire? Have we dimensioned how it has affected? Do we have a plan B? Do we have a DR site where we can go? All of those things, if the company is disclosing. So a lot of our regulation of listed companies is around provide information to the market so that people can make up their minds about you. They can make up their minds whether to stay with you, to come into you, or to exit you. Now, we use technology tools to do this. So we don't expect people to be carrying paper around. So we have something which we created in 2013 called X-Issuer. And we use X-Issuer to communicate with our listed companies. Our listed companies will communicate various things. And if people have been looking at NGX, you may also know that when insiders of the company buy and sell securities of the company, listed equities, that is, they're also required to disclose, and they disclose on NGX. And that will help you also to know, okay, all these insiders are buying. Is it because it's do they know something I don't know and so I want to join them? Or is it because it's good? If they're selling, do I want to sell as well? Now, it's up to you to make your own, understanding of the behavior of the insiders. But we believe we should give you information about that behavior so that in conjunction with everything else that you have available publicly about the company, you can make up your mind whether you should act with the insider, or the insider, maybe you realize there's nothing, this insider may be selling, but there's nothing wrong with the fundamentals of this company. I want to stay. Maybe the insider is selling because he wants to pay school fees. Do you understand? So information, getting companies to provide information, then even the way that they provide it, so there are specific formats for their financial statements in X-Issuer. They have to disclose information about directorships when they're having board meetings. If they're having board meetings about certain critical things, you have to disclose. So there's a lot of disclosure regulation. It's not the same sort of regulation. So I like to call it a lighter touch regulation, because it is saying disclose. It is not saying you must do X or you must do Y. It is saying whatever you are doing, let it be in compliance with the rules, and then let it be known so that people can make decisions. And that's why I always say the market is not a market for ignorant people. You are supposed to engage with the information that you are given and then put that information within the wider economy. Thankfully, there are financial professionals such as your stockbroker who are, licensed by the NGX and then registered by the SEC. And you can go onto the websites of both the NGX and the SEC to find further information. Now, that's what brings me to the last thing I want to say about this, because I'm sure there will be other questions where I can expatiate more. There's a transparency initiative that we have called X Compliance. It's a report on our website that will give you information about listed companies. It will tell you whether they, if they didn't submit their accounts, it will tell you they didn't submit their accounts. So you too, you can look, somebody that has not submitted accounts this quarter, did not submit next quarter. What's going on? Do you understand? And you can make your decisions. You can ask questions because you are a shareholder. You have the right to, engage with the company and ask questions. There are all sorts of rights that are guaranteed to shareholders under CAMA, which I think shareholders, unfortunately, do not exercise some of those rights. Then another thing that we do is we have something called the compliance status symbol. So if you look at any of the electronic media of NGX, whether if you're looking at some of the TV stations like channels like NTA, you will see rolling, especially during the news, information about share prices. Look at some of them. You will see a three-letter symbol beside them. If you see MRF, it means missed regulatory filing. If you see DWL, it means delisting DIP, it means delisting in progress. If you see BLS, it means below listing standard. So all of these things we do in order to give information to people to be able to make those buy, sell, hold decisions, and in order to bring additional transparency to the market. The other things that we do is we ensure that there is compliance with corporate governance codes, and then just general law. The categories of what we do to regulate listed companies is basically not closed. It's a continuum, and we keep going. Those are just some examples.
Sincerely speaking, you've given us a deep insight into some of your obligation at NGX RegCo, protecting the investor, talking about disclosure, and a lot that give confidence to everyone that really want to invest in one company or the other. And the insight that you give, majority of us just watch business news and we see some of those things rolling. I will be smiling even when you see your company written there, GIP, the listing in progress, and you still be smiling that your stake is there because you might not have deep understanding and that you have brought to bear. Our guests are connected globally from every part of the country. And before I go to my question, let me recognize Muibedin with this question. He said, is it not worthy and desirable for NSC to have the security trading floor in some other part of the country aside Lagos? This will definitely assist the investors and practitioners in the sector as a lot to access services at ease. What's your stake to this, brother?
We do have security trading floors in other parts of the country. For example, we have in Abuja, there's a security trading floor there.
Yeah.
Now, I think that question, though, I need to say something. You know, when COVID, we had risk management at NSC and we shut down. When I say shut down, we didn't stop working, but we decided to go remote a week and a couple of days before the federal government said there should be a lockdown. And that was because our own risk parameters had already gotten to the point where if we stayed in the office, they would have been breached. But do you know that for one day, we did not stop trading? The trading floors were not open, but because of the technology that we had and that we had insisted that our broker dealers, the trading license holders have, we did not stop trading. In fact, we were one of few markets around the world, including markets in developed countries. Some of them had to stop trading. So trading, in fact, when you talk of financial inclusion, you are not talking about physical places. You are talking about using digital to further that inclusion. So we have used digital to ensure that our dealing members, our trading license holders, people that trade on the exchange, are actually able to trade from anywhere. So provided that they have the technology, so we're very clear, this is the security you need to have, the information technology security. This is the parameters of what your operating systems have to do, the system that connects to our own trading system. But you don't have to physically come to a floor. Indeed, we only opened our floor from 2020 March. We only opened our floor, the floor of NGX, about a month ago.
Mm.
So there was remote trading, and many people did not know, because the day you will know is when there's something wrong. And thankfully,
Mm.
there was nothing wrong. People were able to
Mm.
trade. That's because of the investments,
Digitalization.
yes, that had been made. Digitalization, and then you don't just digitalize, you test the digital, you test it and ensure it will work. So a lot of failover testing, testing the DL site and all of that before then this happened, and we were good to go. So that's
Mm.
why even a week before the federal government lockdown, over a week, we had already taken the position that we were going to shut down because our risk parameters were about to be breached, and we felt that we needed to let our staff work from home. And of course, the support of the staff, was not a problem. We had only critical staff that had to go into the office. There are certain things that certain types of jobs that needed to go into the office, and that wasn't unusual for any company that shut down. There were still
It's
some people that had.
it's been a wonderful time to idea where guesting you on ICAN on air today, doing justice to the topic, and I'm sure my participants across the globe, those that are even hooking up from every looks and grade of the country, Nigeria, are benefiting enormously from your wealth of experience. But one thing I've always observed is that time is not always my friend. It won't allow me to do justice to important guests like you that can impact my people. I saw a question flagged in by Dr. Abel saying, let me quickly do that maybe in just 1 minute. It's saying, despite the strict regulatory environment in stock exchange globally, I am often surprised when the listed entities collapse. How can investors handle this situation? Just in a minute.
Okay. I think, first of all, investors need to take their role as shareholders in companies very seriously. They should go to AGMs and ask questions. They should critique in a respectful manner to ensure that they're actually being active citizens of the company. They own the company. Once you have one share in the company, you have a right as a shareholder that is guaranteed by karma. And you should ask questions. If things are going awry, you shouldn't be the last to know. I think the other thing is that a lot of people don't know about the complaints management framework in the Nigerian capital market. The apex regulator, the SEC, has a complaint management framework. So you can actually write to NGX about listed companies. You can write to the SEC about any public company at all that you have a concern about. And they have an obligation, given their status as public or listed companies, to respond. And if they don't respond, then you can make a complaint to them. If it's a listed company, to NGX Regco. If it's another public company, to the SEC. Notwithstanding that, the point is, if you're an equity owner, you are putting capital at risk, and businesses will fail, not because of anything, because the business model is wrong, because you have the wrong people running it. There are all sorts of reasons that may not necessarily be fraud or bad behavior that make a company fail. That is why becoming an equity holder in a company is a risk, and is something that you have to pursue your interest vigorously to make sure that you keep that investment.
Sincerely speaking, I keep saying it that time is not my friend. And I want to believe that when next we put a call through, you will always come to enlighten our members the more. But in closing, to do justice to our topic of today, ICANN is always open to ideas that would positively advance the growth of our members, the accounting profession, and the Nigerian business environment. As we are warming up to say goodbye to 2022, what is your advice or suggestions on further contribution, especially in accessing capital through the exchange in 2023?
I think that people need to be very concerned about sustainability and ESG factors, environmental, social, and governance factors, What are the companies that you're interested in investing in, doing about those? And then as a company, what are you doing about the effects that your products have on the environment? Are you taking any steps about that? Are you ensuring that you are properly governed? The social factors as well are you looking at your supply chain to see whether there are human rights violations? All of these things for companies that want to access capital are becoming more and more important in the world, and you cannot avoid them. Investors are interested in knowing, for people that they give capital to, what are you doing to ensure that this company is not just going to die because there's a climate issue that affects the company, or there's a social issue or a governance issue indeed that affects the company. So I think ESG issues, both from an investor side and from an issuer side, very critical that people pay attention. The world is paying attention to it, and Nigeria is a part of the world.
That is a brilliant way to bring to conclusion our program for today, ICAN on Air. And it gives me great pleasure, very interactive, soft-spoken, Tinuade Awe. We're doing justice to it. I would love to be in your class anytime, any day. Either at the doctorate degree. Even those things that I'm not taught, I'm sure you will simplify it. We sincerely want to appreciate you. Out of your busy and tight schedule, you have shared your evening with us on ICAN on Air to enlighten our members on some of the things that they need to do in accessing capital through exchange. And one thing I know for sure is when next we beckon or we call on you, you'll definitely come over to share with us from that deep knowledge of yours, things relating to your circle. Thank you very much, Tinuade Awe, for being here with us. On that note, I want to specially appreciate all our viewers that are connected globally, those in the diaspora from the northern part of the country, the east, the south, the west, for being part of this program every Tuesday and every Thursday. It's always been an interactive session, and I'm sure we keep enriching our knowledge. As we prepare for the year 2023, let's all be on guard to make sure that we do what is needful to make 2023 a more fulfilling year for us individually, and to contribute our quota to our institute in everything that we do. And the country, the nation at large will benefit from every of our contribution. On that note, I want to quickly share this announcement with us that those that are yet to register for the fellowship confirming, the portal is open. We expect you, because that is the highest position for you as a member of this noble institute. And I want to assure you that your institute is prepared to give you more contribution aside the certificate that you are holding, and that you'll definitely be proud of. On that note, let me wind up, and I leave you in the hand of our technical crew as I give you a thank you greeting. I remain your host, Olusesan Okwade. Till I see you again on Thursday. Bye for now.